Yes, it's John G. Sutton. Tales from the Jail. Today I'm going to talk about the governor of Her Majesty's Prison, Wormwood Scrubs, in 1975, when I first went there, and my interactions with that particular governor. The Scrubs is a massive prison. It had the biggest landing in Europe, the single landing in Europe with the biggest number of prisoners. It was over nearly 200 inmates on one landing. That was C2 landing at the Scrubs, and I was one of the officers. That was where I was posted to. Yeah, that was my first posting from Lay Hill Training School. And the governor of the prison was a man called Norman Honey. Yeah, I don't usually disclose names, but Norman Honey's reasonably well known. And he was something of an intellectual, bookish-looking individual, not a particularly robust character. And he was inclined very much to place the responsibility for details with other people, and he would just kind of rubber stamp their decisions. One of the problems was that in the end it was his responsibility. One of the problems I had with Norman Honey, and don't forget I'm just a junior prison officer, there's probably 400 staff at HM Prison Wormwood Scrubs at the time I went there, including auxiliary staff, prison officers, office staff, civil servants, and Norman Honey was the head of the establishment. And he'd appointed the Prison Officers Association to head the housing committee. It was a housing committee. And what they did was allocate housing, that's prison quarters, because in the 1970s the Home Office had houses that they gave to prison officers to enable them to have residence close to the establishment. And don't forget, I had joined at Manchester, and that's where I was residing, in the Greater Manchester area. So for them to post me from the training school to London, it was a distance of over 200 miles away from my home. So they reallocated you housing, they gave you housing, yeah. Anyway, when I got to the Scrubs and applied for a house, which was part of my contract of employment, I was told by the housing committee, which was run by the POA, the Prison Officers Association, that there was no housing available, and that when there was housing available they would post it up on a monthly basis and you could apply for one of the houses. Yeah, which that seemed fair enough. I mean, if the houses are available, yeah. Except months came and months went and no housing. In the meantime, my wife is living in Greater Manchester, in a town called Lee, by the way. Yeah, and I was stuck at the Scrubs, so I used to go every other weekend and drive home and spend a couple of days at home and then drive back. And I was in what's known as what they call as digs, I'm not particularly pleased to be doing this, but I did it because I believed I was starting a career. Mistaken that was. Yeah. So anyway, after about 4 months, I went to see the head of the POA and straight asked her, said, well, what's the score here? I apply for these quarters, these houses that are advertised, houses, apartments, flats, call them what you will, and I'm not getting anywhere with it. He said, oh, well, he said, you've only been here about 4 months. He said, it'll take probably 18 months to 2 years before you get anywhere allocated from the housing committee. I said, really? Right. So this is from the chairman of the POA, not the governor. So I went to other junior officers who joined round about the time that I'd joined, and there was about 15 of us, I think. And I said, listen, I called a meeting of all the junior staff. I said, listen, we are entitled, in accordance with our contracts of employment, to have housing. And we're not getting any housing. We're not getting any apartments, no flats, no nothing. And we're being told by the housing committee that there are no apartments available. And one of the junior officers says, well, my uncle is the chief engineer in the works department. He is responsible for the maintenance of all the housing. I said, well, listen, go and see your uncle and find out exactly how many empty properties there are available for allocation to staff. So he came back to me a couple of days later. He said, I've seen my uncle. He said, he says there's about 12 or 14 properties, something like that, available. And he said that they are ready to go. So, right. So I went to see again the chairman of the Prison Officers Association and told him, you know, that there are about 12, maybe 14 properties available for allocation to staff. I said there are about 15, 16 of us junior staff who've joined the prison and we haven't got anywhere to live, so why is the housing committee not allocating the houses to the officers? He said, well, we've got senior officers coming in on posting from places like Pentonville, Wandsworth, and some come from Parkhurst. You know, they come to the scrubs and we have to allocate the quarters to the more senior staff. I said, and who's told you that? He said, well, that's a decision that the housing committee has made. Now, you see, you've got to remember this, the Prison Officers Association, I, as a junior officer, was a member of the Prison Officers Association, and the only representation I had as a junior officer was to go to the Prison Officers Association. And when I went to the chairman of the Prison Officers Association, he was also responsible for allocating the housing. So effectively, I had no representation. There was nobody to represent me against this rather ridiculous decision that the housing committee had made. So I went back to all the junior officers. I said, right, what we've got to do here. I said, I'm going to go and see the governor. I said, because I've done some reading on this, by the way, according to what I've read, the actual responsibility for the allocation of housing resides exclusively with the #1 governor, i.e. Norman Honey. Yeah. So I went to all the staff. I said, listen, sign this petition. I put my name at the top, signed it. Yeah, my name at the top. And I went to all the says, put your name on here, sign it. I said, now I'll go and see the governor and tell him, you know, that we, the junior officers represented by this petition, require allocation of housing. Not be fobbed off with some story about waiting for senior staff coming from Parkhurst and Penton, Wandsworth or whatever. Yeah. So they did. About 15 of them signed it, you know. I got my name on the top. And I went to the governor's office and knocked on the door with this petition. Nobody with me, just me. Knocked on the door. Norman Honey, come in, come in. Rather ineffectual kind of guy, you know, Norman Honey. But a little bit intellectual, looked like more like a librarian than a prison governor. So he was standing, the chief officer, the #1 chief officer was standing next to Norman Honey, and he was a big, he looked the part, you know, looked a bit like a bigger version of John Wayne, you know, seriously, he was big, he had big bloody hands, I tell you, yeah, and he was standing next to Norman Honey, and I said to Norman Honey, he was sat down at his desk, rather imperiously, yeah, how can I help you, officer? I said, I've got a petition here. I said, we, the junior staff, require that the allocation of housing be expedited because the property is being withheld deliberately by the housing committee, and as you are directly responsible as the #1 governor of this establishment, I am approaching you with this petition from the junior staff to tell you that if properties are not immediately released and junior staff allocated these properties, some have been waiting months and months and months, myself waiting over 4 or 5 months to be housed, said if we do not get allocated accommodation, then myself and these staff will be outside the front gates of your prison with placards, banners, and the press will be there, and you, as the head of the establishment, can tell them what we're doing. So because you are responsible, not the housing committee. The housing committee only acts on your instructions. The chief officer, the #1 chief officer starts, get out of this office. And Norman Honey says, officer, I said, I'll take into account when I put this petition on his thing, you know. And almost as if he was coming to throw me out physically. He was a big bastard. He probably could have done it, you know. I mean, I'm not going to start brawling in the governor's office. So I just, thank you very much, and went out. Anyway, about 3 weeks later, I'd applied for this apartment, you know. About 3 weeks later, they published it, you know, who'd got allocated property. Sure enough, I'd been allocated a property. I got it. And all the other prison officers who were in the list on that petition I'd put in, they didn't get any property. So when I called a meeting for them and told them, you know, I said, oh, well, I've got a property, you know. And they said, well, how did you do it? How did you do it? How come you got it and we didn't? I said, well, what you've got to do, you've got to get yourself a petition, put your name on the top of it. I said, and take it to the governor and tell him if you don't get a house, you're going to demonstrate outside the prison gates. Yeah? Well, you can imagine that nobody did that. But I got the property, yeah. But that was Norman Honey. Yeah, he was passing it. But that's just a further example of how the Prison Officers Association were actually taking managerial responsibility, and it was to the detriment of the junior staff. Hence, if you were a member of the Prison Officers Association and you were seeking representation in that light, as I was, you didn't have any representation because the Prison Officers Association were management. Anyway, the time has come, the walrus said. Yes, folks, it's the song dinger. I'm going to sing you a song now that was made famous by a guy called Donovan in the 1960s. He was always on Top of the Pops with Ready, Steady, Go, I think, yeah. My father hated this guy because he was arrested for drugs. And apparently he was found in an apartment in London, stoned out of his mind and stark naked with a couple of women, and he jumped on the police stark naked and started fighting them. There was nothing much to Donovan, by the way, so he wouldn't have done a great deal of harm. I should imagine that he got himself seriously slapped. I don't know, but I know my father absolutely hated him. You know, my father was very strict. He believed in the rule of law. Yeah, seriously. He enforced it at our house. I mean, I know it sounds unbelievable now, but my father had a homemade cat o' nine tails, a big leather belt that they used in the to sharpen razors, and he'd sliced it into strips of leather, and he used that to chastise me with. Hard to believe. I mean, that would be Exhibit 1 today, wouldn't it, Your Honour? Child abuse. But I mean, in them days, you didn't know any better. And I'm sure that was the way he was treated. Anyway, here we have it. I'm definitely gonna emasculate this. I'll rip the testicles off it. Yeah. It's called Catch the Wind. In the chilly hours and minutes of uncertainty, I wanna be in the warm hold of your loving mind, and to feel you all around me now, to take your hand along the sand. But I may as well try and catch the wind. When the sundown pales the sky, I wanna hide behind your smile. Everywhere I'd look I'd find, and for me to love you now would be the sweetest thing that would make me sing. But I might as well try and catch the wind. When the rain has hung the leaves with tears, I want you near to kill my fears, to help me leave all my blues behind. Standing in your heart is where I want to be and long to be. But I may as well try and catch the wind. Here in your heart, that's where I want to be. Oh, I long to be. But I may as well try and catch the wind. I might as well just try and catch the wind. There you go. Catch the Wind, made famous by Donovan. And that's today's Tales from the Jails. Hope you subscribed and liked it and all the rest of it. And we'll speak soon, no doubt. Thank you very much.